And so he sailed. And he sailed under the name of a missionary organization, which we don't need to mention the name, they don't exist anymore. But if you ever read the annals of Hudson Taylor's life, this organization was ostensibly criminal. So like Hudson Taylor, they would send people out with the promise of supply and funding and never give it. And they would take donations, and the donations would end up who knows where, and missionaries on the field would end up having to go without. And that was Hudson Taylor's experience. He had hitched his wagon to a very lame horse indeed. And so he went out to China, and he strove. In fact, when he arrived there, he'd been given letters of introduction. One of the persons he was meant to meet had died. Another person he was meant... Now, the trip's like a 7-month voyage, so none of this is too surprising. The second person he was meant to meet had left the country, and the third person he was meant to meet said to him, "What organization are you coming out under?" When he mentioned the name, it was a laughingstock, and Hudson Taylor soon learned why. He was desperate to win China for Christ, but he had been so inhibited and hamstrung by the delinquency of the organization that he had been sent out under. In fact, he soon resigns the organization. He decides that if God is calling him to be a missionary, just like God had called Paul the Apostle and many others before him, then God's going to supply. Hudson Taylor's desire was particularly for the inland parts of China. At this point in world history, especially in Western history, inland China was ostensibly unknown. It was just this continent that no one really knew anything about. Westerners were not allowed to visit. They were forbidden. Not only were Westerners seen with the most aggressive suspicion, it was actually unlawful for them to leave treaty ports on the coastline. There was a few cities that had been designated Western friendly, and to go outside of those portions was a crime that could be punished easily by death. A capricious, an ugly, a horrific death at that. Hudson Taylor's heart is for the teeming masses in mainland China that don't have the gospel, but he is so inhibited, not only by his organization that sends him, but he's desperately inhibited by other things as well. And one of those things is a deep-seated anti-Western sentiment. To be a Westerner, whether you're British or French or Portuguese were there at the time, or of course American, you were seen as a deeply suspicious person. In fact, the Chinese believed, not all of them of course, but enough of them believed that Westerners were only in China to steal children, to take them and grind their bodies down to make their medicines. The Chinese were deeply superstitious people. And these Westerners turned up to China with these fandangled new medicines and science techniques and surgeries that they'd never seen, they didn't know, and they'd begun to believe these rumors. And so if you were a Westerner in China in the day, you were just called simply a demon, a devil, a pig, maybe a dog is the most endearing term you might hear.